When the current lockdown in England ends next week, the vast majority of people will find themselves in Tier 2. Now that means that mixing between households will be banned indoors and hospitality venues will be closed unless they serve a substantial meal. The Prime Minister said England was facing a hard winter and he realised the restrictions would cause a lot of heartache and frustration, especially for the hospitality industry. Some of Mr Johnson's own MPs have expressed their anger and their disappointment at the news. So many cities in the north and the Midlands, including Manchester, Hull, Newcastle and Birmingham, as well as Bristol in the west and the county of Kent in the southeast, they will go into Tier 3, that is the highest category. Most places are in the second highest level, Tier 2, and they include London and they also include the Liverpool City region. Only the Isle of Wight and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly will be in Tier 1 with the lightest restrictions. And the rules for what's allowed within each of the tiers have changed. We'll bring you the detail in just a moment. First, our political editor, Laura Kunsberg, has the latest.
That's for also your birthdays as well.
December will be month 4 for people in West Bromwich. Hunkered down, banned from seeing friends and family they don't live with, apart from work or school. COVID cases are still high and the market's quietening down. Sarah is worried about hanging on.
I'm struggling to find the money to pay for my pitch. Tier 3 isn't going to work for us. We need to drop right back down.
Raquel lost his job last year and now there are fewer people out and about to hear him sing.
I can't guarantee getting money every day when I do come out, but it's just come out at such a time where it's just as I said, it's just thrown me because I couldn't have prepared for this.
The Prime Minister might be out of his isolation now.
Well, the tiers feel tough.
But the country's a long way from escaping restrictions.
If we ease off now, we risk losing control of this virus all over again, casting aside our hard-won gains and forcing us back into a New Year national lockdown with all the damage that would mean.
As we emerge next Wednesday, only a tiny proportion of us will go into looser limits under Tier 1. Nearly 60% of England will be under Tier 2 rules, where pubs, shops and restaurants can be open and some limited socialising will be allowed. But nearly 40% of people, mainly in the north of England, will be under stricter rules, Tier 3, where pubs and restaurants have to shut apart from takeaway and you're not meant to leave your local area. Remember, the rules are different in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. It's a complicated patchwork and the lines are hard to draw.
Even inside individual areas, there's strife over whether it's fair. By the Peace of the Canal in Berkhamsted, cases are low. But it will be in Tier 2 anyway, because in other parts of Hertfordshire, the disease is on the rise. Gary's sort of grinning and bearing it.
Would have much preferred Tier 1 because, as you say, there's so little COVID, but if they think it warrants Tier 2, we've just got to go along with the rules.
Robert was on furlough, but is now back at work, although has some time for his boat.
Once the numbers go down, then we can start socialising, but before that, then I think everyone's going to have to basically suck it up.
What was the point of the national lockdown in England over the last 4 weeks if more people are moving into tougher restrictions than before?
This is not continuing the lockdown. On the contrary, across all tiers, shops will be open. But what we want to avoid is relaxing now too much and taking our foot off the throat of the beast now.
And if you do get together with elderly relatives, the government scientists suggest if you want them to survive, don't get close.
Would I encourage someone to hug and kiss their elderly relatives? No, I would not, because you could be carrying the virus, and if you've got an elderly relative, that would not be the thing you'd want to do.
There are doubts about the new system, and a tricky start after the website with the information crashed at first.
We also need to be convinced that the government actually have got a plan to get places out of these higher tiers, because at the moment there's just some warm words and not a lot of detail.
And some Tory backbenchers are angry that their big areas have been treated all the same.
Well, I think the government's made the wrong call. We have the information that tells you that there are different rates of infection. We know how people move around, and the tiers should have reflected that.
The lines on the map will all be reviewed in the middle of December, depending how we respond, depending how the disease responds. The way we're asked to behave in town and country may change again before too long.
I think it's fair to say that the government wouldn't be doing this if they felt they had any choice, but Downing Street is also well aware that there will be disappointment, frustration and even some scepticism among some people watching tonight, and also even on the Tory backbenches. MPs do have to vote to approve all of this next week, and it might be a bit bumpy for the government, but I think the view from Number 10 today was also crystal clear, that if this kind of action isn't taken now, and if most people don't actually follow these rules, then there is still the prospect of a much more dramatic shutdown for everyone, everywhere, on the other side of Christmas.
Laura, many thanks again. Laura Kuenssberg with the latest there for us tonight at Westminster. So, just to recap, England returns to the three-tier system next Wednesday, but what people can do and can't do within the tiers has changed. Hairdressers, gyms and all shops can open regardless of the tier throughout England, but everyone who can work from home is being told to do so. In Tier 1, households will be allowed to mix, although the rule of 6 should be followed both indoors and outdoors. In Tier 2, households will not be allowed to mix indoors, and alcohol can only be served as part of a substantial meal. But in Tier 3, pubs and restaurants will remain closed except for takeaways, and households will only be allowed to mix in some outdoor public spaces, not in private gardens or in hospitality venues. The government will review the restrictions in England every 14 days. The first review is due on the 16th of December. Our North of England correspondent Danny Savage reports now from Yorkshire.
This, it turns out, was aspirational thinking in Hull. There was an infection rate of 776 per 100,000 people a couple of weeks ago. No surprise here then that they're going into the new Tier 3.
During the first lockdown, the only people that I knew were a friend of a friend's auntie who had it, really, in this area. But more so, I've got children at school and they've got friends that have contracted it, friends' parents that have contracted it.
People here say not enough locals have stuck to the rules, while some are sticklers for them.
It's absolutely right. My husband's been self-isolating since well before. He's on the extreme list, so we have to be everything careful.
And you're happy for that to go on for some months?
And I'm happy because if it can save lives, then yeah.
Those living on this side of the Humber were expecting Tier 3. But over there in Lincolnshire, the whole county is also going into the highest tier. That is a very large rural area where even the Conservative leader of the county council can't understand government thinking.
Huge areas of Lincolnshire actually have lower rates than the national average, so it does seem very perverse to put the whole area into Tier 3, and obviously that will mean businesses and families and individuals will be suffering far more restrictions than is really necessary.
70 miles away, Harrogate has moved from Tier 1 pre-lockdown to Tier 2, where one new concession is that up to 2,000 much-missed spectators are allowed at sports events.
The crowd's coming along to see the goals and the trophies. It's like the horse and carriage, they have to go together.
Next Wednesday, all the shops can open again too.
It's not fair. Marks and Spencer's in Harrogate is open and I can't sell, my clothes. So very, very important, and I can't wait for Wednesday.
And in the highest tiers, there's many more weeks of sitting outside in the cold if you want to catch up with a friend. Danny Savage, BBC News.